I don't know if you can hear me. There's something stalking us. Something that doesn't belong here. It finds us wherever we hide. Adapts to every plan we have.
Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, we are going back to Alien Isolation. Well, at least not on the CRTV, but we are actually going back to the game because, you know, a certain announcement happened this week and it resulted in my plans getting moved up a bit. I wanted to talk about this game later in the month because you may remember in a little video that we talked about in the month of August 2024, Aliens, Colonial Marines. First time, what did I say there? I'll see you in October for Alien Isolation, and the universe just paving its way for a perfect time to talk about Alien Isolation. It's the 10-year anniversary of this wonderful survival horror game. I've never played it before. I'll explain that in a moment. And now we have a sequel on the way. So the question many of you may be asking is Alien Isolation really that good? And I was asking the same thing because I'm a brand new Alien fan this year. I watched Alien for the first time this year, Aliens for the first time. I checked out Alien Romulus, which I loved, by the way. I thought it was a beautiful hybrid between the horror of Alien as well as the action of Aliens. Like, I'm really attached to this universe now. I thought it was so good. But Alien is my favorite of all of the Alien movies. And holy smokes, do I love the now retro future style and how this game is full of that. Like, this universe just brings me in each time. So it's a really good time to look at this sequel. And again, the universe just paving a way where we planned on this video in October, as I mentioned back in August, had no idea a sequel would be announced. So is it really that good? I fired it up, I played for a few hours, and I just want to give some thoughts on this because I know it's not your usual type of retrospective from me, but oh my God, as a now Alien fan, I regret sleeping on this game. So let's give a little bit of backstory. But first, if you're new here and you're into nostalgic and retrospective content, you're in the right place. Consider subscribing. Alien is a series that I think has gone through some high highs and low lows, famously so, right? A lot of these prequel films have brought fans down. It feels like Romulus was a good return to form. Of course, though, in the middle was also the video games, which you had some high highs like Aliens vs. Predator behind me. You also had low lows like Colonial Marines, which we played for the first time this year, and others that ended up being cult classics in games like Alien Isolation. At launch, Alien Isolation reviewed and so it led to it becoming that sort of cult classic title. But as time has gone on, people have loved it more and more and more. And now Creative Assembly is going to go back and make the sequel with the same creative director. So there's reason to have optimism here. And that's the beauty of the games industry growing. There's a lot wrong with the games industry, but it's so awesome that things are so big now that they're looking at games that have been dormant for 10 years and saying, let's make a sequel to that. It feels so unlikely. We still have to wait and see what the game is going to look like and play like. But if it's anything like this, we are in for a treat. So as I mentioned at the top, I love Alien. I love that horror approach to this franchise. And that's what Isolation is all about. First off, I just love how it connects itself to the original Alien movie right away. As you may or may not know, Ripley goes missing and Amanda is now looking for her. And that's what naturally brings her into this mission, and it brings you into this story if you are invested in this franchise. Now, many moons ago, your boy did play Alien Isolation on my PS4. I have a few hours logged in it, and I moved on from it pretty quickly because I knew some people liked it. I wanted to try it out because I do love survival horror titles, but it didn't click with me, and I moved on from there. Why was that? Simply put, if you are not an Alien fan, I think this can bring you into that world. But really, like, this is so tailor-made for those who love this franchise. I mean, frame one, the art direction is just impeccable. It's so good. Like, I just want to stop and stare at every location in this game. Playing it on PC, highest settings, on 1440p monitor, 60 FPS. It's beautiful. You never hear me talking about resolution and frame rate. We run a retro channel, for God's sakes. I don't really care about this stuff, but this is one of those worlds where, yeah, the opening hour is very walking simmy. You know, you're gonna just walk, and if you love this universe, I was taking in every step of it. The environmental art direction is beautiful and feels like it's ripped straight out of the movies. But it's also like the clutter, the way they've decorated the environments. it's just absolutely beautiful. Like each step of the Sevastopol station just tells its own story without it ever uttering a word. It's one of the game's greatest strengths, and it only gets better as I was introduced to Metroidvania mechanics, where you start to get like little tools and you can go back to parts of the station and unlock them with the maintenance jack or the ion torch. Oh my God, like just the design alone is so exciting. But more than anything, it's about the horror experience, which I've been trying to dip my toes into more and more. I described this feeling on Retro Rewind and wanted to break it down here a bit in the game world. I'm very protective of how often I play horror games because it's one of the few genres that doesn't just glance off me if it's not really good or really bad. It's one that always manages to permeate the amount of games I play, the amount of content I consume. And it's because I play horror, I watch horror in a very rare amount. Because I'm an easy target. I don't thrive off of getting scared at all. So I'm very picky when I do sit down and go, okay, I want to be scared right now. Like I want to enjoy that. And as you've noticed with Retro Rebound, every October, it's a good time for me to sit down and get scared. We talked about Silent Hill 3. We talked about Silent Hill 2. Now we're talking about Alien Isolation. Like when I'm in that spooky mode, I love it. But I love it because I go into it sparingly. So with Alien Isolation, one thing I can say I absolutely love about it is the scares feel so authentic is the best way to put it. I feel like good scares are a lost art. And by that I mean, in Alien Isolation, the first jump scare did not come from, as you would expect, Alien. No, it came from actually one of the androids. So when you first get your motion tracker, you pick it up and they're like, hey, you can see your objectives with this thing. You can see enemies nearby, people nearby. And so I bring it up and I see like, oh, my objective's behind me. And I turn around and who's standing right in my face but an android. And it got the first jump scare out of me. I went, wow, that was so good because it was so well done of not like, I'm screaming at the TV or wow, that really scared the hell out of me because it made a loud noise and blew out my eardrums and that jarred me. It was an authentic, good scare of like, I'm paying attention to the game's mechanics. I'm checking my motion sensor. I turn around and would you know, there's someone right behind me asking if I need help. It was just, to me right there, it's a weird point to fall in love because there's much more I love about this game. But there I went, they get it. They get it, man. I was so surprised with the crafting mechanics, how you'll roam this station and find loot and build things from flashbangs to med kits to flares, and all of these have their own uses and some are on timers. Like the flares are really helpful to light certain areas and you can place them down, but they're gonna run out eventually. The flashlight you get runs out of battery really quickly, so it's a different type of resource management. It's not just how I typically approach survival horror with some of my favorite games like Silent Hill, Resident Evil, Dead Space, where you're managing ammo. It's really just managing resources, finding loot, building things. You have to get scrappy here because you will get a gun, for example, and I tried using the gun and I lit up some androids and yeah, like they take a lot of shots to kill. At first I was thinking like, all right, I got a revolver, you're not paying attention, boom, no problem whatsoever. 4 headshots later, I'm like, okay, I don't think I'm that much of a sharpshooter, so this is gonna be a little dodgy. And then I get chased down by another android and yeah, it gets messy really quickly and suddenly I'm out of ammo. So it's not really a game about the shooting. It's a game that really thrives off of surviving and playing what is best described as a game of hide and seek. That really comes to life when the alien shows up. This is so cool because it's dynamic. The AI just lets this thing roam. It can show up whenever, wherever, and it really has you holding your breath. One of my first encounters, he's taking out a bunch of random people on this station. I show up, I'm like, oh boy, and I just tuck myself into a corner. I'm like, please God, don't turn to me. And this thing, like the sound is so good as I hear it stomping its way to me. And he's right there next to me and I'm thinking I am dead, and if he looks at me I'm going to scream, and he jumps right up into the vents above me and I actually hear him walking away gradually. I'm like, if I make a noise he will come back. That stuff is so impressive and can absolutely carry a game all the way through because there's no real survival horror game like that outside of, I would say, Resident Evil 2, specifically in the remake where Mr. X follows you around and kind of show up whenever. That creates an authentic sense of tension that whittles away at you. The other thing I love about particular horror experiences is what I call the stamina bar. I've talked about this with a lot lately because it's spooky month, so I apologize if you've heard me say this before, but in certain horror experiences like a Silent Hill, it's not about, ooh, I scared you, boo, and let's set up the next scare. It's more about, here's your stamina bar. How can over the course of a couple of hours, we just shave this bar off lower and lower until you're really weak and we're making you jump at everything. And I feel Alien Isolation does that because of its impeccable sound design. I mean, if you play this with headphones on, dark room, what an experience. It gets you so paranoid with every little sound the station makes. The environmental sounds are so good. Of course, hearing the aliens stomping about, because there'll just be times you're walking around and you'll hear the thump, 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 and you're like, is he near me? Is that someone else walking around? Like, what is that? And what it does beautifully is it puts you in the shoes of your character. One of the best design choices they made with this game was making it first person, because now you're seeing the world through their eyes and you're sitting there thinking, like, if I were in this situation, this would be what it's like. I think this would be a wonderful VR game. I don't know if it is or not, but like, just looking at it from first person, the survival mechanics, how it's more about hide and seek, the immersive qualities, this would be a beautiful horror VR experience. I absolutely love everything I've played of Alien Isolation thus far. It really is that good. It's because it's dynamic, it's because it's so true to its source material, and interestingly, I have heard that this game is quite long, and that's what whittled away some people. Some folks didn't like that this game was pushing close to the 20-hour mark. For me, that sounds like music to my ears. Anything in that 20-hour pocket, 30 hours max pocket, is a really exciting premise to me. But back then, it seemed like this was a drawback for a game where horror games were expected to be in that 6 to 12-hour pocket. And I like that apparently this game pushes longer because I love this world. I want to live in this world longer, and I want my stamina bar to be depleted. The masochist I am asking for that, but I really do. I want to have this game whittle away at me and just scare the life out of me each step of the way, because I feel like that's what Romulus did. When I walked out of the theaters for Alien Romulus, we talked about it in our Retro Rewind review, that this was a movie that was like an experience, at least for me, and that when I stepped out of the theater, I was so relieved. Like, I felt like I had to just decompress after just being so emotionally exhausted. Like, it was such an intense, loud, in-your-face, horrifying film. And so when you finish that 2+ hour runtime and you leave the theater, there's that exhale. And I love that I'm kind of getting that feeling from a game. It's not as heartthrobby, I would say, as at least so far, something like Alien Romulus, but it captures that tension that I think is so good here. I also just love like the other immersive qualities that come with things such as hacking a doorway with your security access tuner. And so this will bring up a little mini game where you're matching patterns, and sometimes you're like just timing, pressing the A button at the right points in the middle of these bars. And they're just these little things here, but as someone who loves, for example, like Fallout or Elder Scrolls, where they have these little mini games to access certain areas like lock picking or hacking, I really love the approach here, especially because the world's still happening around you. So again, it's all about immersive qualities. And for those who don't know, this is a style of game I've appreciated since I was a kid. Not particularly survival horror. I was a late adopter of that because, yeah, Scaredy Pants here was not really looking to get the snot scared out of me every step of the way. So I was really picky with that. But it's first-person immersive qualities. It's things like Bethesda Game Studios that really taught me how much I love that stuff. From the environmental design and how stories can be told just by decorations laid about a room, all the way to just picking up objects. It really began there for me with Morrowind and Into Oblivion. It was so important to see that sort of stuff. And it carries on to this day. Games like Cyberpunk are a perfect example of just how conversations with other NPCs and how there's no real, I put in quotes, cutscenes per se. You're just watching the world act before you. It's so captivating to me, always and forever, so captivating. And especially in a game like Cyberpunk where the facial animations are so great, that just does a ton for me. Whereas a game like Alien Isolation, if there's anywhere it's wearing its age, it's not an environment, it's not an art direction. That's beautifully done. Gameplay so far is great. AI feels advanced. Like, this feels like the type of AI experience you're sold for next gen tech, where they're like, yeah, with the cloud, we can do some really crazy stuff. It feels like this was the game that kind of got that. It's funny, we got a couple of games in that pocket. Like, we hear games being sold as like the most beautiful thing ever, but then I look at Arkham Knight, which was from 2015, and go, I mean, I don't know, man. Like, that looks really good for that time. Are we sure? But anyway, to my point, the one thing that shows its age here are facial animations when they're not fully rendered cutscenes, like characters just talking in world. It looks bad. Yeah, like I mean, I can live with the drawback because most times you're not interacting with people, but for how often it's happening in the early opening hours of the game, like, you know, you might have wanted to make this a little bit better. There are fully rendered cutscenes in the game that, again, sound design is great. Like, for example, when you were like traveling into the Sebastopol station, there's this point where there's a big explosion, and just the way it's like muffled because you're in deep space, it just sounds so good. I don't know how to break down how sound sounds good, but it does just tickle my ears in a good way. There's really very minimal drawbacks in these opening hours, but I am such a fan of what's here, and I say all of this to say that, like, yeah, man, I am all on board for a sequel. As like a already big Alien fan, just even as a new adopter, so excited to see what they can do with a new game, with this new tech. Like, what are they going to maintain from the old game? There's so many exciting opportunities here, and I know, even though I'm late to the party, Alien fans have been starving for a while, and it feels like this year, really with Romulus, there's been a good turnaround of like, this is a future to believe in. It's not perfect for many, but it's a future to believe in, and I'm very excited to see what things become as time goes on with other Alien products. We know that there was a leaked Fireteam Elite 2 game coming out next year potentially, and then also you have new movies, I imagine. Like, this is probably a new trilogy with Romulus, and you also have this game. Like, it's really exciting to see how Alien is ramping up and staying relevant. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think Alien Isolation really is that good. I've loved my time with it, and of course, many of you out there have already beat the game, so please fire away down below. Inform the masses. Is this game really that good? Fire away. Other than that, I'll catch all of you in the next Retro Rebound. Peace out.